And welcome back. I'm Mr. Jason, and this is another evening in the planetarium at home. And since I'm at home, I guess I don't really need this for you. I can't get you sick, so I'll take that off so maybe you can hear me a little bit better. But we do have a lot to show you. Last week we went over, how we could take pictures of the night sky and explore it through astrophotography, and how, we don't really have to see it the way our eyes see it to get a lot out of these images. Today, we're going to dive into some mythology, the stories behind the constellations. And we're going to explore some stories that, might not be too familiar. In fact, I know they're not familiar to anyone that's joined me in the planetarium before, because really we're going to be looking at stars that are pretty faint and hard to find. But we're going to take a look and explore them nonetheless. And I'm going to share with you some old stories about those stars. But we're going to start off first by going outside and looking to our western sky. Our western sky, we still have some of the stars of winter there, the bright stars, but you might notice something missing from our western sky. This is tonight's sky at about 9 o'clock-ish, just as soon as it starts getting dark. As soon as it gets dark, the stars will come out. But right now we're missing the bright fake star, that imposter Venus. Venus, it's still up there, and, it's really bright still, but we can't see it later on. It's setting earlier and earlier. As it's moving between us and the sun, it's moving closer to the sun, so it's going to be up during the day. And we won't be able to see it at night, and we won't be able to see it until it re-emerges in our morning sky on the opposite side of the sun. But if you go out, you can see it as soon as the sun starts to go down. Before the other stars come out, you should see Venus still glowing brightly low in the western sky. The winter stars are still up there, the brightest of which is Sirius. It's now getting lower to the sky, lower to the horizon, actually. And, there's still Procyon, the other dog star. It's out there too. And we can make that nice triangle in the sky by connecting Sirius to Procyon and on down to Betelgeuse, which is hiding behind the trees here, but it might be visible for you if you have a clear view of the western sky. And that, of course, is our asterism, as we talked about a couple episodes back, the winter triangle. It's still out there for a couple more weeks, but it's soon going to be diving beneath the horizon earlier and earlier and be up during the day with the sun, so we won't be able to see it. There's still more up there, of course. We're going to turn ourselves around. We're going to spin around to face north. In the northern sky, there's another asterism that we're all familiar with, or many of us are familiar with. It's the Big Dipper, 7 stars that you can, connect the dots. You can draw a line from this one star to the next to make the handle, and then draw from our first cup star on through to make our cup. The Big Dipper, it's not a constellation, it's an asterism. But we could still use it to find our way around the sky. We can use it to draw a line straight down. These 2 pointer stars, of course, Merak and W, we use them to draw a line straight down to Polaris, our North Star. It's a pretty dim star and hard to find. That's why we use the Big Dipper. But it's still out there, and it's out there all the time. It never rises, never sets. The Big Dipper and Polaris you can see tonight. The Big Dipper is an asterism. It's part of a larger constellation, the Big Bear, Ursa Major. It's actually the back and long tail of the bear. But we're not going to get into that story, not that tale, right now. Many of our patrons who have visited the planetarium before have heard that, about how the bear's tail got stretched out in the sky. We're going to look at some of the springtime constellations and the stories behind those. To find the springtime constellations, we use the Big Dipper's handle, and we, follow that arc, and we arc across the sky to the east, where we arc to Arcturus. We're going to continue that curve on to Spica, and from Spica we can, of course, make our leap overhead to Leo the Lion, but we're not going to bother with Leo the Lion in that story. We're going to continue the great curve that started with the Big Dipper's handle, through Arcturus, through Spica, and it ends in Corvus, the crow. Corvus, well, it's kind of a little box of stars, but it's supposed to be a bird, a crow. Crows, we know, are black. They're not very beautiful birds, but a long time ago, as the story goes, and there's a couple of different stories about Corvus, both come from an ancient Roman poet named Ovid. In ancient Rome, this was about first decade of AD, right around the turn from our before Common Era BC to our Common Era AD. This poet was writing, and he was taking, in some cases, a lot of the myths and stories from the ancient Greeks and from other people. In fact, we think Corvus has its roots in Babylonian stories and mythology, and he was making them, Roman, their own. And he told two different stories. One is from his, epic poem called The Metamorphosis. And it was all about taking these old stories, these old myths, and changing them a little bit to make them Roman. And, the story starts off with Apollo, the god that pulled the sun across the sky every day, and his bird. His bird was the crow, Corvus. But a long time ago, Corvus wasn't just a black bird. Corvus was actually a beautiful white bird. Its feathers were white and almost golden in their colors. He was so beautiful. But the story goes, Apollo, who, kind of a jealous type person, he wanted to spy on his girlfriend. So he sent his faithful crow, his bird, Corvus, to spy on her. And he found out that his girlfriend wasn't being faithful on him. Corvus saw this, returned home to Apollo and told him. And in a case of, you shouldn't blame the messenger, Apollo blamed the messenger. And just like in many of the other stories in the Metamorphosis, there was a changing. In this case, Apollo changed Corvus's feathers, those blue, those pretty white and goldish feathers, into black ones. Well, not that great. But he was still Apollo's bird. And there's yet another story about him. It follows from the stars beneath Corvus. They move across the sky, across the southern sky, towards the west, in fact. And they connect the dots to make a big, long, snake-like structure. That is Hydra. It's really a water snake. That's what Hydra means. Hydro, water. Hydras were water snakes. And that's going to come into our story in just a moment. On the back of Hydra, there's Corvus, and also a little square of stars. There's more to this constellation, but we really can't see them, especially down here in southeast Louisiana with our humidity, our thick air, and, of course, lots of light. Too much light pollution. But we can still make out a little square of stars, which makes up Crater, the cup, or chalice. Crater and Hydra and Corvus are all part of another story that comes from that Roman poet Ovid. This one comes from, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, called it's a poems of the seasons of the calendar. It's called Fasti, and this is one of the stories for the month of February. The story goes is that Apollo was throwing a celebration, a feast for his mother, Juno, or as the ancient Greeks called her, Hera. Well, Apollo wanted some water for this feast, and so he sent his bird, Corvus, to go fetch his chalice, Crater, and go get some water and bring it back. Well, the story goes that Corvus did as he's told until he flew by a tree, a fig tree, in fact. But the figs weren't ripe. And so Corvus, he got hungry. He's like, I'm going to wait around for these figs to ripen up. And so he perched in that tree and kind of forgot about Crater and his task to bring water for Apollo. And he waited until the figs had ripened. When they did, he had his fill, and he realized, oh, wait, boss told me to go get water. This is not good. Well, he, being a little trickster of a bird, Corvus, the crow, he swoops down and grabs a water snake from from the stream or river he was fetching water from. He grabs Hydra and brings Hydra back to Apollo. And he's like, Apollo, I'm sorry I'm late. I really, really wanted to get you that water. I really tried. But, well, this water snake, this Hydra, stopped me. He stopped the water from flowing, so I couldn't get to the water. Well, Apollo, who is also not only the god that pulls the sun across the sky according to these ancient stories, he was also the god of prophecy. And you don't want to lie to the guy who can, well, see what's going on, even when he doesn't see it with his eyes. And that's the case of Apollo. And so Apollo, well, just to prove a point that you shouldn't go telling lies to the god of prophecy, he threw Corvus, the cup, and that water snake all up into the sky to be a reminder of, well, maybe you shouldn't just go lying about what happened. It's better to tell the truth, because you never know who you're lying to. But there's more to these stories and these pretty pictures. There's our Hydra, our Corvus, and our Cup Crater. These are some of the springtime constellations. And I told two different stories from one poet, but those stories go back even further than that poet. Like I said, to Babylon, and maybe even before. People have been telling stories about the sky for, well, ever since there have been people to look up. These are just some of those stories and some of the constellations. There are 88 official constellations that fill up our sky, and they all have their own stories. And I'm going to share more with you. But these were two stories about 3 constellations that I haven't told before, not even in our planetarium shows. So I hope some of our regulars enjoyed this look at our spring sky, and go out and look up. Of course, we plan to be seeing you real soon in the planetarium, but until then, do, in fact, go out, look up, and try to find Corvus. Use the Big Dipper in the north to arc across the eastern sky to Arcturus and Spica, and then on to Corvus. Use Corvus to find Hydra, that long snake, and the crater. Not a crater like formed when a rock blasts into the moon, but a cup, a chalice, on the back of the snake. And you can remember that old story of the water snake, the chalice, and of course, the crow. I hope you all enjoyed this evening in the planetarium at home, and I hope you can join us again. I'm Mr. Jason with the St. Charles Parish Library Planetarium, and I hope to see y'all soon. Have a good evening.